The sharp crack of a slap echoed across the rooftop helipad so loudly that even the spinning helicopter blades seemed to pause for a moment. Every worker froze. Every executive turned. And standing in the middle of the blazing afternoon sunlight was a tired single father holding a lunch cooler in one hand and his cheek in the other. The woman who had slapped him was one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. But what happened next would uncover a secret buried for nearly 15 years. Before we begin, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Single Dad Empire if you believe kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can change lives. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this one to the world. The summer sun hung high over the city skyline, painting the glass towers in shades of gold. At the top of the tallest building stood a private helipad where helicopters landed daily carrying investors, celebrities, and business leaders. Among the dozens of employees rushing across the rooftop that day was a man named Rowan Mercer. At 38 years old, Rowan looked older than his age. Years of hardship had carved deep lines around his eyes. His hands were rough from work, and his clothes were always simple. Every morning before dawn, he prepared breakfast for his 9-year-old daughter, Sienna, before taking 2 buses to reach the building where he worked as a maintenance technician. Life had not been kind to Rowan. 7 years earlier, his wife had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him alone to raise their daughter. Since then, every day had been a battle against bills, loneliness, and exhaustion. But despite everything, Rowan never complained. His daughter was his entire world. On that particular afternoon, Rowan had been asked to deliver emergency maintenance equipment to the helipad after a communications panel malfunctioned near the landing zone. The helicopter carrying billionaire investors was due to arrive within minutes. Everyone was tense. Everyone was rushing. As Rowan hurried across the rooftop carrying the equipment case, a powerful gust from an approaching helicopter suddenly knocked a stack of documents from a nearby assistant's hands. The papers exploded into the air like white birds. Without thinking, Rowan dropped his case and ran to stop the papers from flying over the edge of the building. He managed to catch several sheets. But one of them struck the shoulder of CEO Vivian Hartwell. Vivian Hartwell was famous throughout the business world. At 42, she had built a billion-dollar technology empire and was known for her brilliance, discipline, and ruthlessness. The media called her the Iron Queen. Employees feared her. Competitors respected her. And very few people ever challenged her authority. As the paper touched her expensive designer jacket, Vivian spun around in fury. She saw Rowan standing nearby. Before he could explain, her hand flew across his face. The slap stunned everyone. The rooftop fell silent. Rowan stood frozen. His cheek burned. Humiliation flooded through him. Years of struggle had taught him to endure many things, but being publicly slapped in front of dozens of people was something he had never imagined. Vivian glared at him with cold eyes. She believed he had carelessly interfered with an important business operation. To her, he was simply another employee who had made a mistake. But then something unexpected happened. Standing behind Vivian was her longtime bodyguard, a massive former military officer named Marcus Vale. Marcus had protected her for nearly a decade. Nothing escaped his attention. As Rowan turned his face away, Marcus noticed something on the side of his neck. A scar. A long jagged scar stretching beneath his jawline. The moment Marcus saw it, the color drained from his face. His heartbeat quickened. Memories he had spent years trying to forget suddenly came rushing back. 15 years earlier, Marcus had been deployed overseas during a humanitarian mission after a devastating flood destroyed several villages. During that mission, their convoy had been attacked. Chaos erupted. Vehicles overturned. People were trapped. Marcus remembered being pinned beneath twisted metal while floodwaters surged around him. He remembered believing he would die. And he remembered one young volunteer who risked everything to save him. The volunteer had dragged him from the wreckage moments before the vehicle exploded. During the rescue, the young man's neck had been sliced by shattered metal. The injury left a permanent scar. Marcus had searched for that volunteer for years afterward. But he had never found him. Now, standing before him on a rooftop 15 years later, was the same man. Marcus knew instantly. The scar was unmistakable. The eyes were the same. The face was older. Tired. Worn down by life. But it was him. Without hesitation, Marcus stepped forward. The rooftop workers watched in confusion as the intimidating bodyguard approached the maintenance technician. Then something happened nobody expected. Marcus removed his sunglasses. His eyes filled with emotion. And in front of executives, investors, and employees, the bodyguard lowered his head respectfully. The crowd gasped. Vivian stared in disbelief. Marcus rarely showed emotion. Yet now he looked as though he had just found a lost brother. As questions filled the air, Marcus quietly explained what had happened 15 years ago. He told everyone about the flood. The attack. The rescue. The young volunteer who had saved his life. The man standing before them. The same man who had just been slapped. Silence spread across the rooftop. Vivian's face slowly changed. The confidence disappeared. The anger vanished. In its place came something unfamiliar. Shame. For the first time in years, she realized she had judged someone without knowing anything about them. She looked at Rowan carefully. Not as a maintenance worker. Not as an employee. But as a human being. And she finally noticed the exhaustion in his eyes. The worn shoes. The patched work uniform. The quiet dignity he carried despite his hardships. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Rowan simply picked up his equipment case and continued walking toward the damaged communications panel. He did not demand an apology. He did not defend himself. He simply returned to work. That quiet response affected everyone more deeply than any speech could have. Over the following days, Vivian found herself unable to stop thinking about him. She asked her staff to investigate his background. What she learned shocked her. She discovered Rowan had never missed a day of work despite raising his daughter alone. She learned he often skipped meals to save money for school supplies. She learned he secretly repaired broken equipment for coworkers without charging them. She learned that every Christmas he volunteered at local shelters. Most surprisingly, she discovered he had once been a gifted engineering student whose education was interrupted by family tragedy. Life had forced him onto a different path. Yet he never became bitter. The more Vivian learned, the more uncomfortable she felt. Because she realized she had spent years building a company focused on profits while overlooking the struggles of people working beneath her. Weeks later, she made a decision. One bright morning, Rowan was called unexpectedly to the executive conference room. He feared he was being fired. His stomach twisted with anxiety as he entered. Instead, he found Vivian waiting. Alongside her stood Marcus. And on the table rested a folder. Inside was an offer that would change Rowan's life forever. The company had created a scholarship program in his daughter's name. His salary would increase substantially. Most importantly, he was being offered a position in the company's engineering development division, allowing him to use the talents he had buried years earlier. Rowan sat speechless. For the first time in years, hope entered his heart. That evening he returned home carrying the news. When little Sienna heard that her father finally had a chance to pursue his dream, tears filled her eyes. She wrapped her arms around him tightly. At that moment, Rowan realized that every sacrifice had been worth it. Every sleepless night. Every struggle. Every setback. Months passed. Rowan flourished in his new role. His innovations helped improve company operations and saved millions of dollars. But more importantly, he inspired others. Employees saw proof that kindness and perseverance still mattered. Vivian changed as well. She became a different leader. A more compassionate one. She launched employee assistance programs and education opportunities for workers throughout the company. All because one encounter had forced her to see people differently. And years later, whenever reporters asked her what transformed her leadership style, she always remembered that afternoon on the helipad. The day she made her greatest mistake. And the day a forgotten hero reminded her what true strength looked like. Before we reach the end, if this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Single Dad Empire. Stories like these remind us that every person carries a hidden story and deserves to be treated with dignity. Special request: comment below with the words, "Kindness always returns," if you believe good deeds eventually find their way back to those who give them. As the sun set over the city that evening, Rowan stood outside his apartment watching Sienna laugh while riding her bicycle. The golden light reflected in her smile. For years, he had felt invisible. For years, life had tested him. Yet the very scar that once reminded him of pain became the symbol of a forgotten act of courage. A scar that proved kindness never truly disappears. Sometimes it sleeps quietly for years. And then, when hope seems lost, it returns to change everything. And that is why we should never underestimate a simple act of compassion. Because the person you help today may become the miracle you need tomorrow. The world often remembers power, money, and success. But in the end, it is kindness that leaves the deepest mark on the human heart.